All right, team, grab your tools. Let's clear these units.
You heard him. Let's go.
Yeah, on it.
Picture this, a man who spent his entire adult life pushing a mop across dirty floors. A man whose hands are calloused from decades of scrubbing toilets that corporate executives use without a second thought. A man who drives a car held together by duct tape and hope. A man the world sees but never really notices. Now imagine that same man standing in a storage unit, holding something in his trembling hands. Something that makes his knees weak. Something that makes him question everything he thought he knew about luck, fate, and justice. His name is Jerome Washington. He's 47 years old. He's a night janitor in Atlanta, Georgia. And what he found in a storage unit he bought for $275 didn't just change his life, it exposed a secret that powerful people had buried for 3 decades. This isn't one of those feel-good stories where everything works out perfectly. This is real life. This is complicated. This is messy. And by the time I finish telling you what Jerome found, you're going to have to ask yourself a very difficult question. What would you do? But before we get to the discovery that shocked everyone, you need to understand who Jerome was before that Saturday afternoon in October. You need to know what led him to that auction. You need to know why he made the choices he made, because this story? It starts long before that storage unit. It starts with a little boy in South Atlanta who learned early that the world isn't fair, but you show up anyway. Jerome Washington grew up in the Mechanicsville neighborhood of Atlanta. His mother, Dorothy, worked 3 jobs, McDonald's during the day, cleaning offices at night, and doing hair in their kitchen on weekends. His father wasn't in the picture. Never had been. Jerome learned early what it meant to work. At 12 years old, he was bagging groceries at the Kroger on Metropolitan. At 15, he was washing cars at a detail shop. At 17, he dropped out of Carver High School to work full-time when his mother got sick. Dorothy died when Jerome was 19. Breast cancer. No insurance. Bills that buried them even deeper than they already were. Jerome worked at a warehouse, trying to pay off medical debt that felt like quicksand. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. By the time he was 25, Jerome had accepted his reality. He wasn't going to be successful. He wasn't going to be rich. He was going to work hard jobs that paid little, and he was going to survive. That's what men like him did. They survived. He got married at 27 to a woman named Tasha. She was beautiful, smart, and worked as a nurse's assistant. They had a daughter, Maya. For a few years, life felt almost normal. Almost good. But money problems have a way of poisoning everything they touch. The arguments started. The stress. The resentment. Tasha wanted more, not luxury, just stability. Jerome was working 60 hours a week and they were still barely making rent. When Maya was 6, Tasha left. Took Maya with her. Moved to Charlotte with a man who had a steady job with benefits. A man who could provide what Jerome couldn't. Jerome didn't fight it. What could he offer? Weekends in his studio apartment? Dinners at McDonald's because that's all he could afford? He loved his daughter more than breathing. But love doesn't pay for school supplies or dance classes or birthday parties. He saw Maya twice a year if he was lucky. Christmas and summer. Tasha wasn't cruel about it, she just knew Jerome couldn't provide. And Jerome knew it too. So he worked. Took a job as a night janitor at Piedmont Plaza, a high-rise office building in downtown Atlanta. The shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The pay was $26,000 a year. No benefits. No retirement. Just enough to keep him alive, but not enough to actually live. He was invisible. The executives who worked in those offices never looked at him. He'd empty their trash bins filled with half-eaten sushi and expensive coffee cups, and they'd walk right past him like he was a ghost. Jerome was 47 years old. He had $847 in his checking account. He lived in a studio apartment in East Point that smelled like mildew. He drove a 2004 Nissan Sentra with 200,000 miles on it. He ate ramen noodles 4 nights a week. This was his life. This was all it would ever be. He'd accepted it, until he hadn't. It started innocently enough. Jerome was scrolling through YouTube on his phone during his lunch break at 2 a.m. He was sitting in the basement maintenance room, eating a bologna sandwich, when an algorithm recommended a video. I bought an abandoned storage unit and found this. He clicked it. Watched some guy open a storage unit and find old tools, some furniture, a box of vintage comic books worth $300. Nothing life-changing, but something about it fascinated Jerome. He watched another video. Then another. Then he fell down the rabbit hole, storage unit auctions. People buying abandoned units. Sometimes finding treasure. Sometimes finding junk. But always, the possibility. The hope. The chance that one door could open to something different. Jerome started watching these videos every night during his shift. He'd clean the bathrooms on the 14th floor while listening to stories of people finding rare coins, antique furniture, valuable collections. Most of it was junk, sure. But sometimes, someone would hit the jackpot. His coworker, an older Haitian man named Pierre, noticed the obsession. Jerome, my friend, those videos are designed to make you dream. They're not real life. They show you the wins, not the 1,000 losses. But Jerome couldn't stop. For the first time in years, he felt something that terrified him. Hope. Hope is dangerous when you're poor. Hope makes you do stupid things. Hope makes you spend money you don't have on chances you shouldn't take. Jerome knew this. He'd watched his mother play the lottery for years, throwing away money they needed for groceries on Powerball tickets that never hit. But he couldn't shake the feeling. What if? What if he tried just once? What if one storage unit could change everything? He started researching auctions in the Atlanta area. There were several companies that held them, usually on Saturday mornings. The rules were simple. Units that hadn't been paid for in months got auctioned off. You bid, you win, you have 48 hours to empty it. Jerome spent 3 weeks just watching. He drove to an auction in Decatur but didn't bid. Watched from the back of the crowd. Saw how it worked. Saw the professional buyers, people who did this for a living, who knew what to look for, who had trucks and storage spaces and resale connections. He felt stupid even being there. What was he thinking? He was a janitor, not a treasure hunter, but that feeling wouldn't go away. That whisper in his mind, try. Just once. Try. In September 2024, Jerome made a decision that would change everything. He had $1,100 saved up. Money he'd been putting aside for Maya's birthday. She'd be turning 13 in November. He was planning to send Tasha $500 and use the rest to visit Charlotte and take Maya shopping. He told himself he'd only spend $300. He'd go to one auction. Buy one unit. See what happened. If he found nothing, he'd still have $800 for Maya. That was the plan. He drove to AAA Storage Solutions in College Park on a Saturday morning. The parking lot had about 30 cars. The auction was starting at 10 a.m. Jerome sat in his Nissan, hands gripping the steering wheel, having a conversation with himself. This is stupid. You should leave. You should save this money for Maya. But another voice responded, when was the last time you tried for something? When was the last time you took a chance? You're 47 years old and you're invisible. What if this is your moment? At 9:58 a.m., Jerome got out of the car. He had $300 cash in his wallet. His heart was pounding like he was about to commit a crime. The auctioneer was a short white man with a mustache, wearing a company polo shirt. He had a clipboard and a bolt cutter. Professional. Efficient. He'd done this 1,000 times. All right, folks, welcome to AAA Storage. We got 17 units today. Rules are simple, cash or card only. You get 48 hours to clear out. What you see is what you get. No refunds, no complaints. We're starting with Unit 12B. Jerome watched the first few units sell. $400. $600. $850. These professional buyers knew what they were doing, calling out bids without hesitation. Unit 5 went for $125. Nobody really wanted it, looked like it was full of old clothes and broken furniture. The buyer, a young white guy with a beard, looked disappointed the moment he won. Then came Unit 8F. The auctioneer cut the lock and rolled up the door about 3 feet. Standard practice, you could peek inside but you couldn't enter or touch anything. Jerome pushed through the crowd to see. The first thing Jerome noticed was the smell. Even from outside, he could smell it, musty, stale air that hadn't circulated in years. Maybe decades. The unit was 10 by 15. Not huge, but not small either. And it was packed. Completely packed. In the front, Jerome could see 2 old filing cabinets, stacked cardboard boxes with no labels, a desk chair with a ripped seat, some plastic storage bins, and weirdly, in the very back, barely visible, what looked like a safe. A big one. Dark green. Old-fashioned. The kind you'd see in a movie about bank robbers. The crowd noticed it too. Murmurs rippled through the bidders. Is that a safe? Can't tell if it's locked or empty. Probably empty. Nobody leaves a full safe in storage. The auctioneer grinned. He knew a safe added excitement. All right, folks, Unit 8F. As you can see, we got file cabinets, boxes, storage bins, and yes, that appears to be a safe in the back. Can't tell you what's in it. Can't tell you if it's locked or not. What I can tell you is this unit hasn't been opened in over 15 years. Belonged to a business that went under. Let's start the bidding at $300. $300. Jerome's exact limit. A woman in the front immediately called out, $300. Damn. Jerome's heart sank. $350. A man on the left. $400. The woman again. Jerome should have walked away. Should have waited for the next unit. But he couldn't stop staring at that safe. What if there was something inside? $425. Jerome heard himself shout, heads turned. The woman sized him up, saw his old clothes, his nervous energy, and smiled slightly. She could outbid him all day. $500, she said calmly. Jerome felt sick. He only had $300 in his wallet. He was done. But then something unexpected happened. The woman's phone rang. She glanced at it, frowned, and stepped away to answer. Hold on, she told the auctioneer. Ma'am, I can't hold the auction for a phone call. She waved him off, walking toward her car while talking urgently into her phone. All right then. I've got $500. Do I hear $550? Silence. The other bidders were moving toward the next unit. The safe had created initial excitement, but most of them knew better. Safes and storage units were almost always empty. $500 going once. Jerome's mind raced. He only had $300 cash. But he had his debit card. He had $800 more in his checking account. If he bid $550, that would be $250 over his limit. That would leave him only $850 total. That would mean Maya's birthday. $500 going twice, $550. Jerome shouted. The auctioneer pointed at him. I got $550. Anyone else? No? All right then, sold to the gentleman in the blue jacket for $550. Jerome's hands were shaking as he walked to the auctioneer's table to pay. He used his debit card, watched his account balance drop, felt his stomach drop with it. The auctioneer handed him a receipt and a new lock. "You got 48 hours, brother. Lock's got the combination written on your receipt. Good luck with that safe. Hope it's full of gold bars." He laughed. Everyone laughed. Jerome tried to smile but felt like he might throw up. What had he just done? He'd spent $550, more than half of Maya's birthday money, on a storage unit full of junk in a safe that was almost certainly emptied. He walked back to his car in a daze. Sat in the driver's seat. Put his head on the steering wheel. And for the first time in years, Jerome Washington cried, not because of the money, though that hurt, but because he'd let himself hope. Jerome didn't go back that day. He couldn't face it. He drove home, called in sick to work, first time in 3 years, and spent the rest of Saturday lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. A text from Tasha. "Hey, just confirming you're still sending Maya's birthday money by November 1st. She's really excited about getting some new clothes. Thanks." Jerome stared at that message for 10 minutes. He typed out a response 5 times and deleted it 5 times. Finally, he just wrote, "Yeah, I got you." He was lying. He had $550 less than he'd planned. He'd have to figure something out. Work extra shifts maybe. Borrow money from Pierre. Something. Sunday morning came. Jerome woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit, even though he hadn't worked the night before. His body was trained. 30 years of early mornings and late nights had wired him a certain way. He made instant coffee and sat at his small kitchen table. The receipt from the auction was sitting there, mocking him. Unit 8F, combination, 24-15-38. He had until Monday at 10 a.m. to clear it out. 28 hours left. If he didn't empty it, everything inside became property of the storage facility. His $550 would be completely wasted. Jerome made a decision. He'd go back. He'd open that unit. He'd see what was inside that safe. And if it was empty, which it probably was, at least he'd know. At least he wouldn't spend the rest of his life wondering. He drove back to AAA Storage Solutions at 9 a.m. Sunday morning. The facility was quiet. No auction today. Just a few people loading things into trucks, clearing out units they'd won. Jerome parked in front of Unit 8F. The new lock was on it, the one the auction company had provided after cutting off the old one. His hands shook slightly as he spun the combination. .24. 15-38. Click. The lock popped open. Jerome removed it, grabbed the handle, and pulled. The metal door rolled up with a screech that sounded like a scream. Sunlight flooded into a space that had been dark for 15 years. The dust was incredible, thick, choking, floating in the air like snow. Jerome coughed, waved his hand, and stepped inside. It looked even worse in the full light. The filing cabinets were rusted. The cardboard boxes were water-damaged and sagging. The plastic bins were yellowed with age. Everything smelled like decay and forgotten things, and in the back, illuminated now by daylight, sat the safe. It was bigger than he'd thought. Maybe 4 feet tall, 3 feet wide. Dark green metal. A combination dial on the front. A handle. And a nameplate that read, Meridian Security Systems, Atlanta, Georgia. Jerome stood there for a long moment, just looking at it. This was it. This was the moment. Either his life was about to change, or he was about to confirm that he'd wasted $550 on the stupidest gamble of his life. He took a deep breath and walked toward the safe. Jerome knelt in front of the safe. His knees cracked, 47-year-old knees that had spent too many hours on hard floors. The concrete was cold even through his jeans. The combination dial stared back at him. Numbers from 0 to 99. No instructions. No hint. His heart sank. Of course there was a combination. And he didn't know it. The safe could be full of gold bars and he'd never be able to open it. He'd need a locksmith. That would cost money he didn't have, but then he noticed something. The handle. It was slightly crooked. Like someone had forced it at some point. Jerome grabbed the handle and pulled, not really expecting anything. It moved. It actually moved. The heavy door swung open with a groan of old metal, and Jerome stumbled backward in shock. The safe wasn't locked. It had been left open. Whoever owned this unit, whoever abandoned it 15 years ago, had left the safe unlocked. Jerome's hands were shaking so badly now he could barely control them. He pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it into the dark interior of the safe. What he saw made him gasp out loud. The safe was full. Completely full. But not with gold bars or cash or jewels. It was full of documents. Files. Binders. Stacks and stacks of paper in manila folders, legal envelopes, accordion files. Jerome's first reaction was bitter disappointment. Paper. It was just paper. Probably old tax returns or business documents. Worthless, but then he pulled out the first folder. It was labeled in black marker, Evidence, Copy 1. Evidence? Evidence of what? He opened it. Inside were documents. Official-looking documents. Letterhead from Atlanta Development Corporation. Contracts. Financial statements. And then, photographs. Jerome's blood went cold when he saw the first photograph. It showed two men in suits shaking hands. One of them he didn't recognize. The other one he absolutely did recognize, because his face had been all over Atlanta for decades. A city councilman. Someone who'd later become mayor. Someone who was now a state senator. The photo was dated July 12, 1997. 27 years ago. Jerome kept flipping through the folder. More photos. More documents. Bank statements showing transfers of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Contracts for city development projects. Emails printed out, old emails from the late 1990s and early 2000s, and as he read, a picture began to form. A picture of corruption. Of bribery. Of city officials taking money from developers in exchange for zoning approvals, construction contracts, insider information on city land purchases. Jerome pulled out another folder. Evidence, Copy 2. More of the same. Different officials. Different developers. Different bribes. But the same pattern. Another folder. Another. The safe contained 7 accordion files, each one stuffed with hundreds of pages of documents. Photos. Bank records. Recorded phone conversations transcribed onto paper. Emails. Memos. It was a comprehensive record of corruption in Atlanta city government spanning from 1995 to 2008, and some of the people implicated in these documents were still in power, still making decisions. Still trusted by the public. Jerome sat back on his heels, overwhelmed. His mind was racing. Who put this here? Why? Why did they leave it in a storage unit? He found a partial answer in the last file. A handwritten note on yellow legal paper, dated September 15, 2008. If you're reading this, I'm either dead or in prison. My name is Robert Chen. I was an accountant for Atlanta Development Corporation from 1995 to 2008. I kept these copies as insurance. I thought if I had proof, I'd be protected. I was wrong. They found out I was copying documents. They threatened my family. I'm leaving Atlanta. I'm leaving everything behind. I'm putting this in storage under a fake name, paying 5 years in advance, and disappearing. Maybe someday this will matter. Maybe someday someone will find it and do what I couldn't. Tell the truth, the storage unit is under the name James Wilson. The rent is paid through 2013. After that, I don't know what happens. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. I'm sorry I ran. But I couldn't let them hurt my family. To whoever finds this, be careful. These are powerful people. They've already proven they'll do anything to protect themselves. Don't be stupid like me. Don't try to be a hero. Just be careful. Jerome read the note 3 times. His hands weren't shaking anymore. They were completely numb. Robertson had paid the storage rent through 2013. It was now 2024. That meant the unit had been abandoned for 11 years. The storage company had probably tried to contact James Wilson, gotten no response, and eventually auctioned it off. And now Jerome, a night janitor who'd spent $550 he couldn't afford, was sitting in a storage unit full of evidence of government corruption. Evidence that could destroy careers. Maybe send people to prison. Evidence that powerful people had threatened Robert Chin's family to suppress. Jerome looked at his phone. 11:47 a.m. Sunday morning. He was supposed to empty this unit by tomorrow at 10 a.m. What was he supposed to do? Call the police? Call the FBI? Call a newspaper? Or do what Robert Chin did, run? Throw everything away. Pretend he never saw it. Protect himself, but there was a third option. An option that terrified Jerome more than the other two. He could keep the evidence. He could study it. And he could figure out a way to use it. Not for justice. Not for the public good. But for himself, because buried in these files were secrets. Secrets that powerful people would pay to keep buried. And Jerome Washington was a poor man who was tired of being poor. Jerome loaded everything into his Nissan. All 7 accordion files. Every folder. Every piece of evidence. The back seat was full. The trunk was full. His car looked like a mobile filing cabinet. He drove home in silence, his mind spinning. He didn't listen to music. Didn't listen to the radio. Just drove through Atlanta on a Sunday afternoon, carrying secrets that could topple the powerful. Back in his studio apartment, Jerome spread the files across his floor. His entire apartment, all 400 square feet of it, became an evidence room. For the next 5 days, Jerome called in sick to work. He told Pierre he had the flu. He ignored calls from his supervisor. He barely ate. He didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night. He read everything. Every document. Every email. Every bank statement. He took notes on his phone. He created a timeline. He identified the key players. What he discovered was stunning. Over 13 years, a group of city officials and developers had stolen approximately $40 million from Atlanta taxpayers. They'd rigged bids for construction projects. They'd rezoned land to benefit specific developers who'd paid them bribes. They'd approved contracts for friends and family members, and 3 of the people involved were still in government. One was a state senator. One was a judge. One was the deputy mayor of Atlanta. Robert Chin had documented everything. He'd kept meticulous records. Copies of checks. Photos of handoffs. Recordings of conversations. This wasn't just evidence. This was a prosecutor's dream, but Jerome wasn't a prosecutor. He was a janitor. And he had a choice to make. On Friday night, Jerome finally called someone. Not the police. Not the FBI. Not a journalist. He called a lawyer. Not a famous one. He couldn't afford famous. He found a name online, Marcus Hayes, attorney at law, criminal defense, and civil litigation. Small practice. Office in East Point. Reviews said he was honest and affordable. Jerome made an appointment for Monday morning. That weekend was the longest of Jerome's life. He couldn't stop thinking about the possibilities. About what he could do with this information. He could do the right thing. Turn it over to the authorities. Watch powerful people face justice. Maybe get a reward for being a whistleblower. Maybe get nothing. Probably get nothing except the satisfaction of knowing he'd done the right thing, or he could do the practical thing. Contact one of the people implicated. Let them know he had evidence. Not threaten them, that was illegal. But let them know he had information, and perhaps they'd like to ensure it didn't become public. Perhaps they'd be willing to compensate him for his discretion. That was blackmail, of course. That was a crime. Jerome wasn't stupid. He knew that, but he also knew that he was 47 years old and he'd never had anything. He'd worked his entire life, breaking his back for poverty wages, while men in suits got rich by stealing from the taxpayers. Why should he be the one to suffer again? Why should he do the right thing when the right thing had never been done for him? Sunday night, Jerome couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, having a conversation with himself. One voice said, "You're better than this. Your mother raised you better than this. Do the right thing." Another voice said, "The right thing for who? For people who've never cared about you? For a system that treats you like you're invisible? You finally have leverage. Use it." At 3 a.m., Jerome got up. He walked to the files spread across his floor. He picked up the folder with the state senator's information. The bank statements showing $280,000 in bribes received between 2002 and 2007. He could send this to a journalist anonymously. Or he could send it to the senator with a note. "I have all of it. Call me." Jerome sat there until the sun came up, holding that folder, trying to decide who he wanted to be. Monday morning, Jerome walked into Marcus Hayes's office at 9 a.m. The office was small, just 2 rooms above a tax preparation business in a strip mall. The waiting room had 4 chairs and outdated magazines. The receptionist was a middle-aged black woman who greeted him warmly. "You must be Mr. Washington. Go ahead in, Mr. Hayes is expecting you." Marcus Hayes was in his early 50s, gray beard, glasses, wearing a suit that had seen better days. His office was cluttered with case files and law books. He stood and shook Jerome's hand firmly. "Mr. Washington, please sit. You said on the phone this was a sensitive matter?" Jerome sat down. He'd brought 1 folder with him, just one, as a sample. His hands were sweating. "Mr. Hayes, before I show you anything, I need to know, if I came across information about powerful people doing illegal things, what are my options?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Jerome carefully. "That's a complicated question. It depends on how you came across the information and what you plan to do with it." "I bought it. Legally. At an auction." "You bought evidence of criminal activity?" "I bought a storage unit. The evidence was inside. I didn't know it would be there." Marcus nodded slowly. "All right. And what do you want to do with this evidence?" This was the moment. Jerome could tell the truth, that he was considering blackmail, and Marcus would throw him out. Or he could lie. Jerome decided on honesty. He'd lied enough to himself. "I want to use it to change my life," Jerome said quietly. "I'm tired of being poor. I'm tired of being invisible. And I'm tired of doing the right thing while everyone else gets rich by doing the wrong thing." Marcus didn't look shocked. He didn't look disappointed. He just nodded like he'd heard this before. "Mr. Washington, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. I've been a lawyer for 26 years. I've represented people who made the choice you're considering. Some of them got rich. Most of them got caught. All of them regretted it. But the people who stole this money, they didn't get caught. They're still out there. For now. But that doesn't mean they won't. And more importantly, it doesn't mean you should become like them. Marcus leaned forward. You know what happens if you try to blackmail these people? One of three things. 1. They pay you, and you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for them to decide you're a liability. 2. They call your bluff, report you to the police, and you go to prison for extortion. 3. They're even worse than you think, and they hurt you. Or worse, they hurt someone you love. Jerome felt sick. He thought about Maya. About Tasha. Could he really put them at risk? What's my other option? Jerome asked. You do the right thing. You turn the evidence over to the proper authorities. The FBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office. You let them handle it. And I get nothing. Maybe. Maybe not. Whistleblower laws exist. Sometimes there are rewards. But even if there's no financial reward, you get something that matters more. You get to sleep at night. Jerome laughed bitterly. I can't pay my rent with sleep, Mr. Hayes. No. But you can't enjoy money if you're in prison or dead. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus said something that changed everything. Mr. Washington, can I tell you a story? About 15 years ago, I had a client. Young kid, 23, found a bag of money in a park. $50,000 in cash. Drug money, clearly. He brought it to me, asked what he should do. I told him to turn it into the police. He didn't listen. Kept it. Bought a car, some jewelry, took his girlfriend on a trip. 6 months later, the people who lost that money found him. They didn't kill him, but they hurt him so badly he'll never walk right again. And they took everything, the car, the jewelry, the money. Everything. Marcus took off his glasses and cleaned them. That kid is 40 now. Works at a car wash. Lives with his mother. Wishes every single day that he'd listen to me. Jerome felt the folder in his lap. Heavy. So heavy. If I turn this evidence in, Jerome said slowly, what happens to me? That depends on what's in that folder. Show me. Jerome handed it over. Marcus opened it. Started reading. His eyes widened. He flipped through pages, his expression growing more serious with each one. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered. How much of this do you have? 7 files. This is just one. Marcus sat back, looking stunned. Mr. Washington, this is explosive. This is government corruption on a massive scale. If this is legitimate, you're holding evidence that could send multiple people to prison. Is it worth anything? Financially? Maybe. The government sometimes pays whistleblower rewards, especially in corruption cases. I'd have to research the specifics. But I can tell you this, if you try to personally profit from this through blackmail or extortion, you will go to prison. These are not people who will negotiate with you. They'll destroy you. Jerome felt his last hope slipping away. So I risked my daughter's birthday money, and I'm supposed to just hand this over for free? Marcus looked at him with something like pity. Mr. Washington, you didn't risk your daughter's birthday money on this evidence. You risked it on hope. Hope that one storage unit could change your life. And you know what? It did. Just not the way you expected. How the hell did it change my life? I'm still poor. You're still alive. You're still free. And you have a choice right now that will define who you are. You can be Jerome Washington, the man who did the right thing even when it was hard. Or you can be the man who became exactly what he hated. Jerome left Marcus Hayes' office with a decision to make. The lawyer had given him a name: Special Agent Linda Martinez, FBI Atlanta Field Office, Public Corruption Unit. "Call her," Marcus had said. "Tell her everything. I'll come with you if you want. But do it today, Jerome. Before you change your mind." Jerome sat in his car in that strip mall parking lot for an hour. His phone was in his hand. Agent Martinez's number was on the screen. All he had to do was press call, but his other hand was holding his phone bill. Past due. $87 he didn't have. He thought about Maya. About the birthday present he couldn't afford now. About Tasha's disappointed text messages. About his mother, dead at 47 because she couldn't afford health care. He thought about the state senator, the judge, the deputy mayor, men who'd stolen millions and were still living in mansions, still respected, still powerful. Why should Jerome sacrifice for them? Why should he be the one to suffer? His phone rang. Pierre. Checking on him. Jerome let it go to voicemail, then his phone buzzed again. A text from Tasha. "Jerome, Maya's been asking about her birthday. You promised $500. I need to know if you're sending it or not, because if you're not, I need to make other plans." Jerome stared at that message. Maya was asking about him. His daughter still believed he'd come through for her. What kind of man did he want his daughter to see him as? He thought about what his mother used to say: "Baby, we ain't got much. But we got our name. We got our integrity. Don't ever sell that. You sell that, you got nothing." At 2:17 p.m. on Monday, October 28, 2024, Jerome Washington pressed call. FBI Atlanta Field Office. "Yes, I need to speak with Special Agent Linda Martinez. It's about government corruption. I have evidence." The FBI took Jerome's evidence seriously. Very seriously. Within 48 hours, Special Agent Martinez had assembled a task force. Within a week, they'd verified that Robert Chen's documents were legitimate. Within a month, federal indictments were handed down. The state senator, the judge, the deputy mayor, and 4 other individuals were arrested and charged with corruption, bribery, fraud, and racketeering. It was the biggest political corruption case in Atlanta in 20 years. The media covered it constantly. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the accused, and Jerome? Jerome was still a janitor. The FBI couldn't reveal his identity. Witness protection protocols. He couldn't talk to the media. He couldn't claim credit. He was still invisible, but there was a whistleblower reward. The Government Recovery Act meant that when stolen money was recovered from corruption cases, a percentage could go to the whistleblower. In March 2025, Jerome received a check from the U.S. Treasury Department for $147,000. It wasn't millions. It wasn't life-changing, retire forever money. But it was more money than Jerome had ever seen in his life. He sat in his studio apartment, holding that check, crying. The first thing he did was call Tasha. "I'm sending Maya's college fund. $15,000. It's going in an account for her today." Tasha was silent for a long moment. Then, "Jerome, where did you get $15,000? "I did the right thing," he said. "And for once, the right thing paid me back." The second thing he did was pay off all his debt. Credit cards. Medical bills. Everything. For the first time in his adult life, Jerome Washington owed nobody nothing. The third thing he did was buy a reliable car. Not fancy. Just reliable. The fourth thing he did was put $50,000 in savings. Untouchable. Emergency money. Retirement money. The fifth thing he did surprised even himself. He donated $20,000 to a scholarship fund for kids in Mechanicsville, his old neighborhood. Kids whose parents worked multiple jobs. Kids who needed hope, and with the rest, he kept working. Kept pushing that mob. Kept being invisible, because Jerome learned something important. Doing the right thing doesn't always feel like a victory. Sometimes it just feels like survival. But survival with integrity is still worth something. The men he turned in went to prison. Justice was served. The money they stole was recovered and returned to the city of Atlanta, and Jerome Washington, the night janitor who found evidence in a storage unit and could have blackmailed his way to wealth, slept peacefully for the first time in decades. 6 months later, Jerome got a letter. It was from Robert Chen. He was alive. Living in Oregon under a different name. He'd heard about the arrests, everyone had, and he'd done the research to figure out who'd turned in his evidence. The letter was short. Mr. Washington, I don't know you, but I know what you did. You did what I was too afraid to do. You stood up when I ran away. I spent 15 years looking over my shoulder, afraid of shadows, regretting my cowardice. You spent $550 on a storage unit and changed the city I still love, even though I can never return to it. Thank you for being braver than me. Thank you for being better than me. I hope the reward was significant. But more than that, I hope you understand what you really won. You won the right to look at yourself in the mirror and see a good man. That's worth more than any amount of money. Sincerely, Robert Chen. Not my real name anymore, but you know who I am. Jerome kept that letter. Framed it. Hung it in his apartment next to a photo of Maya. He still works at Piedmont Plaza. Still pushes a mop. Still empties trash bins at 2 a.m. But now, when executives walk past him without looking, Jerome doesn't feel invisible anymore. He knows who he is. He knows what he's capable of. And he knows that when the moment came, when he had to choose between easy money and hard integrity, he chose right. Maya is 13 now. Jerome visits her in Charlotte every month. He takes her to nice restaurants. Buys her the things she needs. But more importantly, he tells her the truth, in an age-appropriate way, about the choice he made. Baby girl, he told her last month, I found something valuable, and people wanted me to sell it to bad people for a lot of money. But I gave it to good people for less money. You know why? Why, Daddy? Because when you're standing in front of a mirror, you gotta be able to look at yourself. And I want to be someone you're proud of. Maya hugged him tight. I'm always proud of you, Daddy. Jerome Washington bought a storage unit for $550. Inside, he found evidence worth millions. He could have become rich through blackmail. He could have sold his integrity for money he desperately needed, but he didn't. He did the right thing. And while he didn't become a millionaire, he became something better. He became a man who could face himself in the mirror. Sometimes, the greatest treasure you find isn't what's in a storage unit. It's what you discover about yourself when you test it. Jerome discovered he was stronger than he thought. Braver than he believed. Better than the world ever gave him credit for. And that's worth more than any amount of money. If you found evidence that could make you rich but only through blackmail, what would you do? Be honest in the comments. Would you do the right thing like Jerome, or take the money? There's no judgment here, just honest conversation. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that integrity still matters. That doing the right thing still counts for something. Thanks for watching. And remember, you never know what's behind a locked door. But you always know what's in your heart. Choose wisely.